The moment Pam Bondi stepped onto the stage of the televised Global Law Summit in Geneva, her stride said it all. Confident, commanding, calculated. The former Florida Attorney General had spent years weaponizing courtroom rhetoric like it was artillery. And tonight, she thought she was about to deliver another flawless takedown. But across from her, seated with unnerving calm, was Captain Ibrahim Trayor. The moderator had barely finished his opening remarks when Pam leaned forward, eyes sharp and voice laced with condescension. "Captain Trayor," she began, emphasizing the word captain, as if to remind everyone he wasn't a real president. "With all due respect, you clearly don't understand how the law works." The audience stiffened. The challenge had been thrown. Camera zoomed in. Trayor didn't flinch. Pam smiled, misreading his silence for weakness. "You march into countries, reject international protocols, disregard treaties." "Impose treaties, Trayor?" Interrupted, his voice even but piercing. "Designed to bind us, not protect us." "Oh, come on," she scoffed, leaning back. "That's not how law works. Law is structure. Law is order." Trayor tilted his head slightly. "Law," he said slowly, "without justice, is just structured control." The crowd murmured. But Pam wasn't finished. "Do you even know what habeas corpus is? What due process means? You claim leadership, yet ignore the fundamentals of governance." Trayor finally looked her in the eye. Calm, focused, deadly precise. "Say I don't know the law," he replied. "But I know power, and the difference is your law bends to it, mine rises from it." That silenced the room. Even the moderator paused, unsure how to proceed. Pam blinked, then forced a chuckle.
"That's not how."
"It works," she said again. "That's why you lost it," Traore replied without even looking at her this time. And just like that, the atmosphere changed. Suddenly, she wasn't the one commanding the room. He was backstage. Producers scrambled to adjust camera angles. The social media feed was already exploding. Clips of Trayor line, "Your law bends too. It mine rises from it," were going viral before the debate had even hit the halfway mark. Pam tried to recover her posture, but the tremor in her voice betrayed her. "Let's be clear," she said, now addressing the audience rather than Traore. "What we're seeing here is the romanticization of rebellion. This man has no constitution, no courts, no transparency, just authority." Traore calmly interjected. "I mean the kind of transparency that sealed deals with my country behind closed doors, that hit hard?" Pam's lips tightened. "I read your firm's contract with Amber Corp," Traore added, eyes never leaving hers. 7% royalties to your client. 2% to Burkina Faso. Your version of law wrote that." Gasps rippled through the room. Pam sat straighter, but her cheeks flushed. "Those were legacy contracts." "No," said Tor. "They were legalized thefts inked under pressure, reinforced by people like you. And when we tore them up, suddenly we didn't understand the law." She shook her head. "Breaking contracts is not reform. It's sabotage. And yet your nation was never sabotaged by those same contracts," Traore said, now leaning forward. "Only mine." Strange, isn't it? Pam looked to the moderator for backup, but none came. The moderator was scribbling notes, too busy processing Traore's latest blow. "You think I disrespect law?" Traore continued, his voice low but unwavering. "I disrespect hypocrisy." The crowd was still. You could hear the hum of the stage lights. Pam tried a final jab. "I've worked with governments across the globe." "You're not special." Trayor didn't smile, just said, "Yet here you are sitting across from me trying to stop what you couldn't buy." The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was reverent. Something had shifted, and everyone knew it. Pam Bondi had been in courtrooms where she shredded witnesses for sport. She thrived in structured rules, cross-examinations, and legal footnotes. But this stage was different. This wasn't a deposition. This was a reckoning. "Let me ask you something," Dor said suddenly, flipping the dynamic. His tone wasn't aggressive. It was surgical. "How many African leaders has your country removed in the name of law?" Pam blinked. "Excuse me?" he said, his voice Steady. Let's talk numbers. How many coups did your government support? How many puppet regimes did your consultants prop up while quoting laws your team helped draft? She exhaled sharply, waving her hand. Conspiracy theories? History. Trop corrected. I can name them. Lumumba, Sankara, Gaddafi, Nkrumah. Every time. We said no. Someone like you appeared to explain why it was illegal. Pam narrowed her eyes. You think chaos is better than law? But I think chains dressed in legal are still chains. The room was dead quiet. You don't have a monopoly on law, he continued. You have a monopoly on the microphone. We're finally pulling the plug. Pam leaned forward, trying to reclaim the moment. You claim to lead, but your methods are reckless. Arresting opposition, controlling press. How is that justice? Trayor didn't blink. You mean like when your allies shut down entire countries in the name of security? Or when your media silences us with the phrase developing world and pretends? It's not an insult that hit her. The press you defend never called your invasions power grabs. But when we reclaim what's ours, it's lawless. A few members of the audience clapped. Pam shook her head in frustration. You're twisting everything. No, Tro said. I'm untwisting what you've hidden. When in that moment, it was clear she wasn't. On trial anymore? He wasn't either. The moderator attempted to steer the conversation back to safer terrain. Let's move to international cooperation, he said, glancing nervously at his notes. Ms. Bondi, what role should nations like Burkina Faso play in global governance? Pam seized the opportunity, hoping to reassert control. Burkina Faso should participate through proper channels, United Nations councils, rule-based partnerships, not unilateral declarations and resource seizures. We're trying to help them rise. Trayor gave a faint nod, almost as if amused. Help us rise. Yes, Pam pressed. Through guidance, expertise, legal frameworks? Guidance, he interrupted. That began with missionaries and ended with mercenaries. Laughter erupted in pockets of the audience. Pam's face froze. You call it help, Trayor continued. We call it supervision. And supervision isn't partnership, it's hierarchy. Pam's smile tightened into a grimace. Without guidance, some nations spiral into authoritarianism. And with your guidance, Troy fired back. Some nations spiral into debt, the moderator shifted awkwardly. This was no longer a debate, it was a dismantling. Pam tried a final pivot. Let's talk outcomes. Your GDP has shrunk. Foreign investors are pulling out, and you've alienated major allies. How is that leadership? Leadership, Troy said, his voice sharp now. Isn't begging for permission to breathe? We're not building a market, we're building a spine. A murmur swept through the audience, something between admiration and awakening. Pam's voice trembled now. Not from fear, but realization. She was no longer the center of the conversation. The spotlight had shifted. The world is watching, she said weakly. They've been watching, Tor answered. Oh, but now, for once they're seeing. That line, now, for once they're seeing, hit harder than any statistic. Pam looked down, fingers curled, lips pressed. Her poise was slipping. Her arguments were unraveling, and Traorés wasn't even raising his voice. He didn't need to. Had already raised the bar. Pam sat stiffly, crossing her legs and uncrossing them again. Her instinct was to strike back with a legal argument, something polished and practiced. But every time she reached for one, Traoré's earlier words echoed. Too loudly. Your law bends to power. Mine rises from it. She tried anyway. Let's go back to legality, she said, gripping the edges of her chair. International law isn't an opinion. It's the foundation of order. Without it, we invite chaos, corruption, tyranny. Whose law? Traorés asked calmly. Pam hesitated. The law agreed upon by civilized nations. Traorés raised his eyebrows slowly. And who decided which nations were civilized? A hush fell. The same powers, he continued, that once made it. Legal to colonize us, enslave us, tax us for our own resources. That was legal, wasn't it? Pam didn't respond. Legality without morality is just privilege with paperwork, he said, then turned to the crowd. It was legal to sell African children. It was legal to steal gold, rubber, land. It was legal to divide our continent like pie at a European banquet. Now, he turned back to her. So forgive me, he said, if I don't genuflect before your definition of legal. The silence was deafening. The audience was no longer just watching. They were listening with new ears. Pam tried to pivot again, her voice thinner. What about responsibility? You have made decisions that isolate your country. Traoré nodded. Because sovereignty feels like isolation when you've been raised on dependence. And when your people starve, she shot back. They won't, he said. Because for the first time we are feeding ourselves without aid strings, without imported desperation. Pam was speechless. He leaned forward just slightly, voice soft now. You think power is law, but the world is shifting, and where I come from, we've stopped asking permission to exist. A young woman in the audience clapped, then another, then the entire left side of the auditorium. Pam stared ahead. She'd brought a legal book to a war of principles, and the book was on fire. The atmosphere had shifted beyond politics. It was no longer a clash of ideologies. It had become a moral confrontation, one that left Pam Bondi visibly isolated under the stage lights. She glanced toward the moderator again, desperate for a reset. Can we move on? She asked, her voice tinged with fatigue. We've heard enough slogans and speeches. Traoré tilted his head. Is truth a slogan? Now? Pam exhaled hard. This is emotional manipulation. No, he said quietly. It's memory, and you'd prefer we forget it. The room tensed. Pam tried once more to assert control. Speak of independence, yet your country's currency is still printed in Europe. Your economy depends on exports to the West. Your own people migrate for better lives elsewhere. And why do they leave? Traoré replied. Because of conditions created by the very partners you defend. Pam opened her mouth, but Trayor wasn't finished. Your firms drain our resources. Your banks trap us in interest cycles. Your think tanks call us unstable right after destabilizing us. And then you say, look, they can't govern themselves. The audience was locked in. Even the cameraman had stopped switching angles. Pam's face flushed. So what's your solution then? Isolation, nationalism, a one-man state. Traoré leaned back, crossing his arms slowly. No, my solution is dignity. Rebuilt from the ruins your kind left behind. The moderator finally broke the tension. Let's take a short break, but no one moved. Not the crowd, not the panel, not even Pam. Because Traoré had just said what many were too scared to say, and even more were afraid to hear. He had dismantled the illusion that the law was neutral. He had stripped it of its robe and exposed it for what it had often been, a shield for empire. And for the first time that night, Pam Bondi said nothing at all. When the cameras came back, from the break, the tension hadn't lifted. It had thickened. The moderator shuffled his notes as if trying to remember how to host a conversation. Pam Bondi, once the dominant voice on panels like this, now sat quieter, her body more still, her eyes avoiding the man across from her. But Trayor hadn't flinched once. I want to ask you something, Miss Bondi, he began calmly. Not as a prosecutor or politician, but as a person. Pam looked up carefully. When was the last time you were told you don't belong in a room, but you walked in anyway? She blinked. Excuse me? When was the last time you stood somewhere and felt the weight of centuries pushing you out? Pam hesitated, unsure whether it was a trap. Never, she finally said. I've never felt that. Traoré nodded. Exactly. And yet you lecture me on civility, on proper channels, on how things should work. She shifted uncomfortably. Your entire life has been a green light. Ours, he paused. Barricades dressed as invitations. Pam looked away. For the first time, you say I don't know the law? Dor continued. But I do. I know how it was used to justify slavery, to legalize land theft, to jail truth-tellers, to silence ancestors. He leaned forward, his voice lower, more direct. I don't need to memorize the law to see how it moves, who it protects, who it prosecutes, and who it pretends to forget. The crowd was stone silent. Could hear someone's breath catch in the fourth row. Pam opened her mouth to respond, But no words came because deep down, even she knew, he wasn't just right. He was undeniable. And suddenly, it wasn't Trayor who looked like the outsider. It was her. Pam sat still, her confidence visibly thinning. For most of her career, her words had been weapons sharpened in courtrooms, polished on TV, delivered with the certainty of someone who believed the rules would always protect her. But tonight, the rules weren't shielding her. They were being rewritten on live television. The moderator tried to pivot again. Mr. Trayor, some critics say your stance on sovereignty sounds anti-upurration. Is that fair? Trayor didn't miss. A beat? Cooperation? Yes. Control? No. They're not the same. We welcome hands extended in respect, not leashes disguised as contracts. Pam raised her voice again. But you can't reject every institution. International courts, trade agreements, human rights councils. Trayor smiled, not mockingly, calmly, like a teacher about to reveal the answer the student had missed. You invoke human rights, he said. Where? Were those councils when bombs fell on Libya? Where were they when France backed dictators across West Africa? When your allies trained militias that slaughtered villages? Pam's lips parted, but nothing came out. Trayor continued. Else, the law becomes hollow when it has no memory. Justice isn't real if it forgets the graves it was built on. A slow, solemn applause broke out in the back rows, first hesitant, then spreading like a ripple. Pam's eyes darted across the room. Applause for him. Her voice, once firm, was now nearly a whisper. This isn't how debates are supposed to go. Shh. Trayor turned fully toward her, voice low and even. That's because you're not used to being challenged by someone who can't be bought, bullied, or silenced. She stared at him, uncertain if it was anger or fear behind her eyes. Power isn't a podium, Miss Bondi, he said, rising from his chair. It's the people who keep standing, even after history tries to erase them. He extended his hand, not as a gesture of peace, but of finality. She didn't take it because deep down she knew the debate wasn't over, but her dominance in it was. As Trayor returned to his seat, a shift passed through the auditorium. It's not loud, not chaotic, but deeply felt. The applause wasn't thunderous. It was steady, grounded. A wave of quiet agreement from an audience that had seen too many empty debates and finally witnessed something real. Pam sat frozen, her hands clenched beneath the table. She scanned the audience, searching for a lifeline. A nod of support. Something, but they weren't looking at her anymore. The moderator, clearly uncomfortable, cleared his throat. We're nearing the end of this discussion. Final thoughts. I'm forced to smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. My concern, she said, is that populism wrapped in anger can sound like truth. But leadership requires restraint. Order, law. Trayor didn't interrupt. He waited. Pam continued, her voice a little sharper now. What happens when you dismantle the systems? Who suffers? The poor, the voiceless. Chaos always hurts them first. Now, Trayor leaned forward, his tone gentle but unyielding. The poor already suffer, Ms. Bondi. They suffer under debt, your banks wrote. They suffer under trade deals your diplomats negotiated. They suffer while waiting for order to finally feed them. A beat of silence. If anger's what you heard, he said softly. Perhaps it's because you've never had to speak through grief. Pam's shoulders stiffened. I don't represent chaos, Trayor added. I represent the consequence of ignoring injustice for too long. You may call it disruption. I call it correction. Someone in the front row stood and clapped. Then two more. Pam looked down, her final argument lost beneath the weight of history she had tried to dismiss. Trayor didn't gloat. He didn't smirk. Simply looked around the room as if to say, this isn't about me. It's about what's been silenced for too long. When the lights dimmed and the cameras cut, the audience didn't leave right away. Some stayed. In their seats, quietly processing what they just witnessed. Others gathered in hushed circles, not talking politics, but history. Something rare had unfolded in front of them, not just a debate but a reckoning. Pam Bondi exited the stage quickly, flanked by aides. She didn't look back. In the green room, she removed her mic with trembling fingers. It made me look like, I don't understand my own country, she muttered. No, said 1A gently. He made you realize it. Meanwhile, Troy stayed behind. A young black woman approached him near the edge of the stage. My grandfather was born in Ouagadougou, she said. He always told me power didn't come from law books, it came from truth. Tonight, I think he'd have said you proved him right. Troy placed his hand over his heart. Then I've honored more than one fight. When he stepped outside, cameras swarmed him again. Questions flew. Microphones extended. But he paused, looked into one of the lenses, and delivered just one sentence. I may not know every word of your law, but I know who it's written for. The clip would go viral within hours. Not because it was dramatic, but because it was undeniable. Later that night, news programs across the U.S. couldn't agree on who won. But none denied who shifted the ground beneath the debate. Trayor didn't win by shouting louder. He won by speaking a language deeper than politics, one carved from history, dignity, and the sharp edge of memory. And Pam Bondi. She would return to her circuit of commentary shows, still defiant, but less untouched. The image of her looking away during the debate would haunt her appearances. It had become a symbol of power confronted and unable to respond. And Troy, he didn't just walk out of that room. He left owning it. Pam came in with confidence. Traorés came in with clarity. One quoted the law. The other revealed who it really serves. Tonight wasn't just a debate, it was a mirror. And sometimes the loudest voice isn't the one speaking. It's the one making everyone else stop and listen. Thanks for watching. Don't forget, history isn't just written, it's spoken live.